Hi, everybody. Karen Roby here and Tiernan Ray for ZDNet. And of course, most all conversation right now centered around the coronavirus and the implications and the things that we're learning. Of course, Tiernan, it seems that every day is a new development and new changes and challenges for all of us. But this article you put out that we're going to talk about today, I think this is really interesting. Kind of points in a different direction, I think, than what we've been thinking as far as the number of cases, or possibly a graph theory that you write about suggesting that the world may be a little smaller, it seems, than what we thought. So just kind of take off from there and tell us, the premise of this.
Karen, news reports constantly repeat that we're seeing exponential growth in the number of cases, but that may not be quite the case. There's a paper that came out from two researchers, Anna Ziff at Duke University and Robert Ziff from University of Michigan, and they looked at the number of cases and they said, wait a minute, this is not the pattern of growth that would be exponential. What they mean by that is when you have a rate at which disease spreads, you typically expect to see an increase in the rate of infection as time progresses. It kind of picks up speed. And that's the exponential curve that everyone is referring to. What we are seeing is a doubling, but that doubling in the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 takes place in some cases over slowing periods of time. So maybe the first time in China, when it first got started, it takes a couple days for cases to double. Then it might take 4 or 5 days, then it might take a week. And now we're seeing a serious drop off in China, apparently as a result of the quarantine measures. And so what these two researchers said is maybe what we're seeing is not exponential growth, but something called a power law. And the reason that's important is power law is known to be the property of certain kinds of connections, certain graphs of relatedness in the world, and especially infectious disease.
Interesting. And that, the thing is of course, with uncertainty, and there's so many external factors here, Tiernan, as far as, how many people are actually being tested even. So how many are walking around that already have it or would be testing positive if they had enough test kits. So with a situation like this, there's, again, you're juggling so many balls in the air. There's just so many pieces in motion.
There are many pieces in motion, Karen, and none of these kinds of analyses can be certain because, as you point out, there's a lot of dark matter, for one, of people simply not having been tested. And so none of the numbers reported by World Health Organization can be definitive at this point. The main takeaway, whether it's exponential growth or it's something that seems to be slower, like a quote unquote power law growth, the main important thing to take away is people don't float around in a vacuum in the world like molecules in which they have a 50-50 chance of bumping into someone, say in Nigeria, if they're in Louisville, Kentucky. They really have a network of relationships. Now they're under quarantine and lockdown in certain cases. And these are features of a network of relationships that limit their connectedness and their contact with people. And so you have to remember that when you think about how things can propagate, like information on the internet, or like a disease in an infectious situation. The disease can't move as freely as you would assume if you just took the total number of people, the total rate of spread of the microbes, and said, let's just assume it spreads wildly. There are restrictions, and they're imposed, it appears, by what is the graph structure. And that's the fundamental takeaway to remember when you're hearing things like exponential being thrown around by media reports.
Yeah, the word exponential, that in a headline, it'll grab your grab your attention every time. All right, Tiernan, well, really interesting information here, and obviously for everyone that wants to learn more about this, everything included in your article, they can find that and much, much more on all of our coverage on ZDNet and certainly on Tech Republic. Thanks for being with us, Tiernan.